Good morning. My name is Alexis Miller, and I'm the Director of Communications at the Executive Council Office for the Government of Yukon. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Government of Yukon's 10th technical briefing on the heap leach failure that took place at the Eagle Gold Mine on June 24th, 2024. Our goal remains to openly and transparently communicate with the public about the work that has been done to date by the Yukon government to protect the health and safety of Yukoners and the environment in response to the heap leach failure at Victoria Gold's mine. Should you have questions that cannot be addressed by these subject matter experts, or if we do not have the time to answer all your questions today, feel free to reach out to Jordan Owens with Cabinet Communications at jordan.owens@yukon.ca, and she will be happy to direct your question to the appropriate department. On behalf of the Government of Yukon, I want to say that we appreciate that many people have questions and concerns about this situation. As this situation continues to develop, we won't have all the answers yet, but these hardworking folks are here to share what we do know today. I understand this briefing is being live streamed by news outlets, and I'd like to welcome members of the public who are joining us as well. The Yukon government will post a recording of this briefing on Facebook later today. We are also regularly updating the yukon.ca Victoria Gold online hub, which you can find at yukon.ca/Victoria-Gold-Updates. I would now like to introduce the speakers and technical experts here today. There will be some introductory comments before opening the floor to questions. From the Department of Energy, Mines and Resources, we are joined by the Deputy Minister, Lauren Haney, as well as Aaron Dowd, the Manager of Major Mine Licensing. We also have PricewaterhouseCoopers Senior Vice President, Michelle Grant, joining us today. We will start with Aaron Dowd for some opening remarks.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Dowd, and I'm the technical lead on the Eagle Gold response with the Department of Energy, Mines and Resources. I'm here today to give you an update on the developments on site. So in the 35 days since the receivership was put in place, significant advancements have been made in improving water conditions, increasing water storage capacity, improving water treatment capabilities, and understanding the conditions of the groundwater in the area. First, the team has worked hard to improve camp accommodations for workers and contractors and have established more accommodations on site that can house all the workers expected to be needed to support the remediation efforts. This step was instrumental in ensuring the critical remediation work can proceed in an expeditious manner. Peli Construction has begun work on the safety berm across the slide area and its access road. The safety berm will allow us to install groundwater monitoring wells and interception wells near the slide area. The construction of the berm has been seen as a critical development that is necessary to improve safety conditions on site and provide the ability to capture and treat any contaminated groundwater in the area. 18 groundwater wells have been installed on site. These have been installed downstream of the slide area and adjacent to the slide area. These wells will provide critical information on where to focus the efforts to monitor and intercept groundwater. Initial water quality results have shown impacts of cyanide in areas that are close to the slide, but are not showing impacts in areas close to the Haggart Creek. One water storage pond was completed last week, and another larger pond is anticipated to be commissioned within the next 24 hours. Additional work is occurring to increase storage capacity and improve water management on site to ensure storage for contaminated water while the water treatment solutions are being refined. Work also continues to ensure that on-site water treatment solutions are sufficient to protect the environment. BQE, a new water treatment operator, has been making modifications to the water treatment plant and are conducting tests to determine how to provide effective water treatment at the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I'll now pass it on to Michelle Grant from PricewaterhouseCoopers for some remarks.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Grant, and I'm a Senior Vice President with PricewaterhouseCoopers. On August 14th, 2024, PwC was appointed receiver of Victoria Gold by order of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. I have primary oversight of the receivership proceedings on behalf of PwC. I'd like to start off by saying that I was saddened to learn about the heap leach failure on June 24th at the Eagle Mine. All the people who have been impacted by the incident are in my thoughts. I've been working in the field of corporate restructuring for over 20 years and have overseen many receivership proceedings. But this one is very different. Typically, the primary purpose of a receivership is to liquidate assets to maximize value for the creditors. However, in this receivership, the main goal is to complete the environmental remediation necessary for Victoria Gold to comply with the regulatory orders that have been issued in respect of the heap leach failure. The receiver has a team managing the site with the assistance of Victoria Gold employees. Our lead environmental consultant, Parsons, is providing support and oversight on the emergency works projects. We are also working with several subject matter and technical experts. This includes advisors to the Yukon government and the First Nation of Nacho-Nikton. And Victoria Gold employees are actively engaged in the remediation work alongside various contractors. This is an urgent collaborative effort to solve very complex problems with all hands on deck. Real progress has been made on addressing the orders that were issued by the regulators, but we're not out of the woods yet. We believe with focus, collaboration, and the funding we've secured from the Yukon government, the prospects for solving these problems have greatly increased. Typically, a court-appointed receiver does not speak with the media. Instead, we report our activities through court reports and make those available on our website for the public to review. But we appreciate the extraordinary circumstances of this receivership and the public interest, and we are committed to transparency. We are currently working on a court report, which is being prepared for the purpose of updating the court and in turn the public on the status of the receivership. This will be available on our website, and I'm just going to state the address here now so you have it. It's at www.pwc.com/ca/Victoria Gold, all one word. We are also working to prepare a more regular report that we'll be posting on our website in the interest of providing more timely updates. I appreciate there are a lot of questions, and I'll do my very best to answer them today. Where there are questions beyond my area of expertise or technical know-how, I'll have to defer to the experts and may need to respond later by email. Finally, I want to thank everyone who is directly involved in tackling these complex problems. Your commitment to getting this work done in extremely challenging circumstances is truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin and Michelle, for your updates. I will now open the floor to questions. In the interest of fairness, we will begin by giving each reporter one question and one follow-up. If possible, please keep your question concise and identify to whom your question is directed. We will begin with reporters in the room and then turn to reporters joining remotely. Folks joining online, please indicate in the chat if you have a question you'd like to ask, and please identify your name and media outlet. We will start with Katrin, CBC.
Thank you. This question is for the receiver. In August, the Deputy Minister stressed the urgency of intercepting groundwater before freeze-up. It was below zero this morning. Does it look like that will happen?
Thank you for the question. A priority of this receivership is focusing on the environmental remediation efforts, and in particular, the emergency works that need to be completed before winter arrives in the Yukon, and that is what's happening right now.
But will you be able to intercept the groundwater or not?
I think that's Erin's answer, yeah.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah, so groundwater wells can be installed in frozen conditions. And with the commencements of the berm being constructed in the slide area right now, we will be able to install those wells as the berm's being constructed. So we will be able to intercept that water.
Awesome. Did you have a follow-up or?
So the work order initially issued to Victoria Gold in July, this is a question for the Deputy Minister, to start work on the berm was 5 days. We don't have the exact date that construction began on the berm, but it was at least several weeks. How would you respond to the claims being made by former Victoria Gold management about a double standard?
The order stands, the rationale behind it stands, the urgency stands. So there were complicating factors when the receiver took over, primarily to do with accommodations for Pele Construction, for the contractor to be able to do that work. So it took some time to overcome that, and work started immediately when we could accommodate that many people on site. I should say too, you'll hear Aaron and I a bit mistakenly referring to everything as we. And we want to be clear, I think that's a reflection of the collaboration that continues to happen. But we, Yukon government, fully recognize that the receiver is in care and control of the site now, and ultimately overseeing remediation, and noting that it continues to be directed by Yukon government and by the orders that have been issued by federal and territorial agencies.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Michelle, to that, just regarding the berm?
No, I think you've covered it well, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. We'll now go to Sarah, Radio-Canada.
Thank you. Hi, I just want to follow up on Caitlin's question regarding the fall that is coming, winter is coming as well. What else needs to be done urgently to make sure that the site is totally ready for winter?
Sorry, is that question directed at me, or who is that question directed to?
I think from the technical perspective, we can let Aaron talk about
So for winterization, there will be many things that have to be done before freeze up. Things like making sure that the pipes and the pumps are all insulated, making sure that the water treatment plant has buildings around the reverse osmosis units, ensuring that we're able to convey water around the site in winter conditions. So there's a lot of work that's being done by the team on site, identifying everything that has to occur, and that's one of the primary work packages that are going on right now.
Maybe I can just add, Aaron, I think what's really important, and I really want this message to come across, is that we're very focused on the emergency works that need to be done and completed before winter does arrive. And as part of the receivership application, the Yukon government provided funding in support of that. And so we have funding to complete the work that needs to be done before winter sets in, and we are expeditiously working to make sure that that happens.
Did you have another question, Sarah?
And this question is for the receivership. You said you have enough money to do that work for the fall, but to your knowledge, is there enough assets to do the full work of remediation for that mine?
I think it's important, again, to establish that the priority right now is the focus on the emergency work that's being completed before winter, and there has been funding secured for that. The long-term planning is in place to determine what needs to be done after the emergency works are completed. And once that planning is done, a budget can be put forward to determine the funding that's required for that. And that's where we're at right now.
And I'll add from Yukon government's perspective, Yukon government remains absolutely committed to remediating this site. As Michelle pointed out, it is also a budgeting exercise that we go through. So once that information becomes available, we work on the Yukon government side for the appropriations necessary.
Thank you. We'll now move to Cheryl, CBC.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask for the Deputy Minister, probably, the Nacho Dunn offered to co-govern the independent review, and we understand that that offer went unanswered. Can you speak to that, please?
Sure. We have had conversations with Nacho Naik Dunn about this matter. The focus of that work is on maintaining the independence and the robustness of the board and the review. So we've learned a lot in the past month in particular about how to best do that. So the independent board is actually not going to be managed by Yukon government. It will be contracted directly by the receiver, and a secretariat will be in place. But the board will be managing itself and its own review, maintaining that independence. The board may reach out to territorial or federal regulators, as well as Nacho Naik Dunn, at their own discretion to obtain the information they've need. So we've set up the structure and the firewalls to ensure the independence, the robustness, and that the outcomes of that review, which are absolutely critical to so many parties, can be fully relied upon.
Thank you. My follow-up question is also for the Deputy Minister. We've heard a number of calls, including from the First Nation, for public inquiry under the Inquiries Act. What can the public expect on that? Will it begin? Will it happen? When? What are the specifics?
So Yukon government is well aware of the many calls for a public inquiry under the Public Inquiries Act. So that is a cabinet decision to be made. So I'll say that work is in the progress to inform decision making. We don't have a timeline yet on when a decision will be made.
Thank you. We'll now go to Macklin, CKRW.
All right, I think my question is best answered by the Deputy Minister. I believe you touched on it before, but I'm curious if you can elaborate on why construction on the safety berm has taken so long to start, given that it was talked about as far back as July.
I'm going to point it to Aaron for some of the more technical details. You're right that it is a critical piece to the work we're doing, so it's a fair question. Thank you.
So we did direct it in July to the company. We also had said that we would be stepping in it to take that work, and we've talked about that a number of times. When we did that as Yukon government, there were some health and safety considerations on site that we couldn't overcome. So the receivership was put in place. There was a design that was done. We being the receiver, has worked with the company, the Victoria Gold site engineers, to develop a robust design and find safe access to construct that. So the first area to overcome was making sure that there was adequate camp space to house all the workers, making sure that the work could be done safely and the right protocols were in place to ensure that workers in that area would be safe constructing that berm. So it took time to get all of those measures in place. And like we've said earlier, that has occurred. Work is occurring on the berm right now, and it's being constructed.
I think too, I'll add that it sounds like a small thing to say, we needed to get enough camp accommodations and safe accommodations for the number of people. There are, I believe, 120 to 130 people on site right now, so it's significant facilities required, and the camp, the accommodations and temporary accommodations that were in place when the receiver came over were very, very inadequate. So it is just to say a tremendous amount of work was required to make that piece happen. It's not one of the our sort of 4 or 5 main priority areas for remediation, but an absolute critical foundation to being able to do any of that work. But it is just to not understate how much work that did require.
Let me just confirm, if that helps, from the receivership perspective, it's been a priority to make sure that the site is safe. And safety is obviously a priority. I can confirm there are actually almost 150 people on site right now and actively engaged in the remediation works. And as Lauren and Aaron already mentioned, the camp accommodations were insufficient and inadequate, and health and safety protocols that were in place when we became appointed were insufficient and inadequate. And so the receiver has been working tirelessly to address that, and that has been a priority. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Awesome, thanks. And then for my follow-up, I'm just curious if there's sort of a rough date that you expect the berm to be completed by.
We're estimating that the berm will take about 4 weeks to construct. When we had first spoke about the berm, we were anticipating double shifts that could occur with daylight hours. Now, with reduced daylight hours, it's not safe to be working below the slide area when you can't have visual monitoring. So our work hours have been reduced, which has increased the time that it will take to construct that berm.
Thank you. We'll now move to Sarah, APTN.
I'm not sure who this question would go to. It might be the receiver. Now that the berm is being constructed, do we have a timeline of when the total remediation work is expected to be completed by?
I can start. Thanks. As I've said before, the primary focus right now is on the emergency works that need to be done before winter arrives in the Yukon Territory, and planning is underway in terms of the longer-term remediation plan. And when that plan is available, as a court-appointed receiver, we will be providing a report on that information. It will be available on our website.
Okay, and I do have a follow-up. It might be for the receiver again. I saw a filed by the First Nation, Natchanayak First Nation, at the courts yesterday that I believe was still asking for the legal matters with the receivership to be moved from the courts in Ontario to the Yukon court. I guess I'm just wondering if you have any information on that, or is that still being considered, or I guess what's the story there?
Sure. As part of the court application on August 14th, legal counsel for the First Nation of Natchanayak did raise with the judge the prospect of moving the proceeding to the Yukon Territory. And so I believe that there's ongoing discussions on that point. That's all the information I have.
Thank you. We'll now move to our online reporters. I have Blair, Northern Miner.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Blair.
All right. So I guess this question is for the receiver. So in one of the documents on the PwC Victoria website, it talks about the amounts owing by Victoria Gold to secured and unsecured creditors, such as the US 173 million owed to secured creditors and 82.7 million owed to unsecured creditors. So have they been paid yet? And who paid that?
Thanks, Blair. In our receivership proceedings, there's a stay that's put in place as a result of the court order. That means that any creditors that are owed monies from prior to the receivership are stayed, and they aren't paid at this time. So none of those amounts have been paid. But I want to make it clear that any goods and services that are provided after the receivership is put in place will get paid from the funding that's available to the receiver. So the creditors that you're referring to, Blair, are part of the stay of proceedings and aren't paid at this time.
Do you have a follow-up, Blair?
Yes, and then what about the $104 million surety bond that Victoria has held with the Yukon government? Has that funding been accessed yet? And if so, how much has been accessed?
Thanks, Blair. The surety bond remains in place and has not been accessed at this time.
Thank you. We'll now move to Niall from the Globe and Mail.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I reported a story on Monday that the two legacy storage camps at the mine site is based on a conversation with Nicholas Harvey, that they're near capacity and that they're at high risk of flooding, especially with rain expected next month. Can you talk about that? How full are those ponds, and how real is the risk of them overflowing?
Hi. The ponds are full. They're nearing capacity, but water management is one of the critical points on site that is a daily focus. Managing the water is our most important part of the work right now. So while they are filling, we have a water storage pond that is coming online in the next 24 hours that will provide additional capacity. And we are anticipating that will be online before there is any need for discharges to the environment.
And I will say that the receiver has taken a proactive and prudent approach in which Yukon government and the Notchunakdun First Nation have been extensively involved with in terms of developing contingency plans. So prepared for all situations, putting environmental protection as a top priority.
I'm not sure if I actually heard the beginning of your answer. This is for Aaron. Just to clarify, was the first thing you said there was that the two ponds actually are full?
They are nearing capacity, yes.
Nearing capacity. Okay, and just as a follow-up to that, okay, so it's good to know that the information I reported was absolutely accurate, and that this is a sort of I don't know, precarious situation. Another thing that Nicholas Harvey told me was the reason that this is the case is that that contaminated water just cannot be treated at the moment. It's effectively, and that like an effective water treatment solution has not been found yet. Is that accurate?
So water treatment, getting adequate water treatment on site is another one of the emergency works that are the focus. We have a new water treatment operator that is on site that's looking at all different technologies and possibilities for treating water. At this time, we do not have the ability to treat and discharge water, which is why we are so focused on adequate water storage and management.
Thank you.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any more questions for our panel? Yep.
I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what made camp facilities inadequate or unsafe. Why couldn't Victoria Gold's camp be used?
I can start. Decisions were made prior to the receivership about the camp. So when we took over as receiver, the camp accommodations remained in place, and we were working to make them more adequate. So that's what I can tell you about the situation. Decisions were made prior to the receivership about where the employees could be housed, and decisions were made after the receivership in consultation with technical experts, health and safety, and the Yukon government and other advisors. in terms of making the camp more safe and enable the accommodation of all the contractors that are on site doing the work.
We can elaborate a little bit about the situation before the receivership. So the company Victoria Gold had elected to set up a temporary camp because it was deemed unsafe for people to sleep in the regular camp. So we don't have specific regulatory oversight over a decision like that. That wasn't at the direction of Yukon government. It was set up in a temporary manner and without adequate facilities. The company did start initial construction of a berm, not the berm we're talking about, but another safety berm, trying to establish some protection for the camp. So that's something that has been elaborated on since. And a big piece of it has been the monitoring of the heap situation. That's I would say, maybe you can elaborate a bit on what's happened there.
Yeah, so monitoring has been increased at the site on the heap, additional visual monitoring, some additional protective measures around the camp to ensure that when people are in the camp, there are all the different measures in place there, so people can be notified if anything is occurring on the heap leach facility that would cause harm or could cause harm to workers.
Perhaps it would be helpful if I just make this very clear. The original camp, prior to the receivership, the employees and other parties were moved out of that camp and they were in temporary accommodations. On September 8th, with additional health and safety protocols and in place, the employees were moved back into the original camp. So the temporary facilities are no longer being used and the employees are on a temporary basis in the original camp now.
And follow-up question for Aaron. So we've heard that there is potentially a significant amount of contaminated groundwater at the site. With those 18 groundwater wells, you're saying interception can continue over the winter past freeze up. Will those wells be sufficient to intercept all the groundwater, or is the goal right now just to be able to intercept some of it and prevent it from reaching Haggart Creek and the surrounding watershed?
So the wells that have been constructed to date are monitoring wells, and so they are all across the environment to see where the potential flow paths are and get more information about how groundwater moves on site. So those wells are for monitoring. The interception wells will be constructed immediately down gradient of the berm, and those will be in a constrained valley that we're confident would capture the groundwater because it's up inside the valley and not before it fans out. So those are the wells that we will be constructing along with the berm.
We'll now go to Cheryl for your follow-up.
Thank you. And this is a question for the receiver. And I know you've all said the focus right now is on site and on the contaminants, but it's a financial question. I know a lot of Yukoners are owed money, a lot of businesses are owed money, and we know that the CEO of Victoria Gold is no longer in place. Have any of the Victoria Gold senior staff received their severances?
No, I can confirm that none of the senior leadership team that is no longer with the organization received severance. Similar to other creditors, as I mentioned before, there's a stay of proceedings in place, and so those parties would not be able to get those payments at this time.
And just as a follow-up to that, can you kind of give Yukoners a broad sense of like the timeline on when or if any of those creditors may someday see some of that money? How long are we talking here? Do you expect or do you project?
Thanks. As I've said a few times, obviously the focus right now is on that environmental remediation that needs to get done. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's too early to say when there will be an opportunity to determine that.
Go to Sarah.
Thank you. Once again, I have no idea who my question is directed to. But last week, the latest water result showed very little or almost none cyanide in the water around the site. Does that mean that we're out of the wood yet, or is just that the contaminants are elsewhere and we don't know where?
I think it's important to recognize that the site is dynamic. The conditions are always changing. So while we are continuing to not see any effects in Haggart Creek, we will continue to monitor and implement mitigation measures as appropriate.
Okay, we'll now move to our online reporters. Sorry, Kanina, we missed you in the first round. Go ahead from CBC.
No worries. Thanks for taking the question. I just thought it would be worth asking because we have everyone around the table who I think can respond to this. And it's really just given the nature of the story and because it is a story of accountability on many levels. And as the media and as journalists, there's incredible interest in wanting to see what's happening at the site. I'm wondering if there could be a commitment for media to visit before the winter so that we can get a walkthrough, get visuals, get a sense from the experts of the work that's taking place so we can continue to document it in the public interest for Yukoners.
Thanks. Apologies, I didn't hear your name, but thank you for the question. I think at this time, the site is closed to media, and I can take the request under consideration.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll move to Jim, Yukon News.
Yes, hello there. Am I being heard there in the room?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thank you very much. Just given the goal for the receivership that we've heard articulated being restoring the site to a situation where Victoria Gold could continue with while meeting its regulatory requirements. I guess my question is, to what degree does Victoria Gold still exist with no CEO and no board, and how likely is that outcome of them continuing at the site?
I think that's a question for me. Thanks, Jim. So Victoria Gold still remains as a company. What the receivership does is takes the control of the company and puts it in the hands of the receiver. So as I said, Victoria Gold still exists. The receiver has control and decision-making authority and all of the powers that are conferred to it in accordance with the court order that appointed it.
Okay, thank you. And just as a follow-up, could you elaborate on what the process of the receiver relinquishing control back to shareholders or a new board might look like, and what the requirements for that to happen would be?
Sorry, Jim, I think you cut out a bit there. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure, I can repeat that. Am I being heard all right now?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I was asking about the process of the receiver relinquishing control of the company back to its shareholders or its new board or whoever that may be. What does that process look like, and what would the requirements be for that to start?
So what I can say is typically in a receivership, that the receiver remains in control for the entirety of the process, and there isn't a transition back to the company. And in this case, it would be the same. So while the receiver is in place, the receiver is in control, and there's no mechanism to return that control back to Victoria Gold. Does that answer your question?
It does, but like I guess it sort of runs contrary to things that we've heard in the past about the government saying that the goal of the receivership was not to put Victoria Gold out of business, and similar statements. I guess, like, if there's no avenue for anybody but the receiver to be in control here, then is the company not out of business?
Nope, that's why I asked if that answered the question. So I need to probably clarify so that there's a better understanding. So there's a difference between the receiver being in control and what the future prospect of the operation is. So at this point, the receiver is in care and control. And your question, your follow-up is getting to, you know, what happens in the future with the operation. And that's something that, as I said, given the focus is on the remediation and the efforts on that, it's too early to talk about that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the focus right now is, again, as I said, on the remediation. And when there's an opportunity to discuss what happens next, we will do that. There's a mechanism under a receivership that enables assets to be sold. That is one of the powers that's conferred to us. And so there's a prospect that in the future, that will happen, and that is consistent with the Yukon government's messaging on this. And so I just want to make that very, very clear. At this point, we're focused on the emergency works and the remediation efforts, and no decision has been made about what will happen with the mine site in the future. But I do not want people to believe that there is no prospect of that happening. That is absolutely not the case. And I hope that that is very clear. I don't know, Lauren, or if you wanted to follow up with anything from your perspective, but it's very important that people understand that just because the receiver is in care and control doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity to move forward with a future.
Yeah, which would be a subsequent step. And yes, from Yukon government's perspective, we haven't formally turned our minds to that step. We're focused on urgent works and remediation planning. But we do have the vision of, I mean, the purpose of remediation is getting the site back to what it looked like on June 23rd. And in that scenario, it was a viable operating mine. It's certainly possible that there are other companies out there interested in a potential purchase.
Thank you. We'll now go to Blair, the Northern Miner.
Yes, is there any update on the progress of the three-member independent investigation into the accident?
So as I mentioned previously, Yukon government isn't managing the independent review board, and we can think and talk further about communication going forward from the board. But what we can say is the board has had a site visit and has commenced their work. I'm not privy to the details of it, but pleased to say that they have started their work.
Did you have a follow-up, Blair?
Yes, and how much will their investigation cost, and who's paying for it?
Yeah,
I can answer that. So as part of the receivership proceedings, there was a budget that was presented, and included in that budget was an estimate of the cost for the review board for the 90-day initial funding period. Can't recall the exact number that's in the budget, unfortunately, but the funding for the review board costs is borne by the receivership proceeding.
We'll now move to Niall, the Globe and Mail.
Thanks. Just confirming that can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. This question is for Lauren. It's regarding basically, yeah, it's another berm question. So the question is, the berm has taken a lot longer to even start construction. and I know that you guys have explained why that's the case. But when Victoria Gold was still in operation, the original Victoria Gold, I believe Yukon government had issued a directive for them to start construction within 5 days. And then in applying for the receivership, one of the reasons the company was put into receivership is because Victoria Gold was not abiding to directives such as not starting the berm within 5 days. The judge believed the Yukon government's side, so to speak. I don't know exactly what she thought on the berm, but in retrospect, would you admit that some of the ambitions the Yukon government had around the building of that berm and the directive issued to Victoria Gold was not fair or not reasonable or not practical?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that all of the directions, including the direction around the berm, were issued commensurate with the urgency of the situation. And it was reasonable for us to assume that the company who had care and control of the site at the time had the means to execute the work that needed to be done.
Right. Just as a follow on that, I talked to John McConnell, as you know, former CEO of Victoria Gold, and he had said that the plans that Yukon had for the berm weren't sound on an engineering basis. Nico Harvey, probably saw in the story from the other day, said something very similar, that the company was set. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he said a sort of half-assed design that wasn't practical, and that's why they didn't move forward on it. So just how would you respond to that pushback?
Well, I would say it's being constructed now, and I'm very confident in the excellent engineering team and construction team that's doing the work right now. I would also say at any time, Victoria Gold was certainly welcome to have taken the objective and the design parameters provided to it and built on that with their own expertise and make it happen. They chose not to.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think those are all the questions for today. Please feel free to reach out with any additional questions and we'll do our best to address those in a timely fashion. I would also like to remind everyone that more information on the Government of Yukon's efforts to address the Victoria Gold heap leach failure can be found at yukon.ca/Victoria-gold-updates. This website is updated throughout the week as more information becomes available. Thank you to our speakers and technical experts and everyone who joined us today. Have a lovely weekend.